Hello and welcome to this Red Game and Tech video, myself and Marta, where today I have a bit more of a PC gaming focused video for you today rather than a purely technology focused video. But the first thing I want to discuss is something I think you guys will find rather interesting, and that is how PC gaming is growing as a platform in the eyes of developers. So a bit of backstory, a bit of lore if you will behind this before I get into the nitty gritty. We have an annual study, the GDC State of the Game Industry Survey, that basically went to current game developers and spoke to them about trends in the business. So they spoke to 4,000 respondents, and their results were rather interesting as they indicated that PC does remain their favoured platform when it comes to development. But let's talk actual facts and figures here, shall we, rather than wishy-washy statements. So we have 56% of respondents to the survey said their last game actually shipped to PC, 66% said their game they're currently working on will include a PC launch, and at least in this particular study, that is more than twice the number for either the PS4 or Xbox One, and we also saw a slight increase in comparison to last year's results as well. Now, they also were asked which platforms they anticipate their next game releasing on, and PC was again in the lead here, and interestingly, mobile actually brought up second place. We have 62% for PC, 35% for mobile, 32% for the PS4, and 29% for the Xbox One. Now, that's not all the survey actually asked them about. They also spoke more generally about the industry. For example, they asked them whether or not they believe that games industry, or game developers, should I say, should unionize, and about half of them, 47%, believe that they do. And obviously that's been quite a hot topic recently, as there was the first union for this in the UK recently, and obviously there was that whole thing with the voice actors union recently, with them wanting to get a cut of the profits, and then also asked about various other things like Steam's revenue cut and so on and so forth. So if you want to go see the full report, go over to the GDC official website. All you have to do is register and you can view the full report for yourself. So it's going to be linked to the description below this video, but again, you will have to register if you wish to view it, but it is rather interesting. Now, again, this is purely in terms of developers. So I guess the reason it's interesting, other than the obvious, is because it does feel recently at least, or at least the last year or so, that PC gamers have missed out on some of the best games, like, for example, God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2, Spider-Man, and we're obviously going to be missing out on The Last of Us 2, and games such as that in the future. But when it comes to the industry as a whole, I suppose you could argue that games like that are a smaller minority than the games that come out on all platforms, and that's obviously what we're looking at here, developers who develop for all platforms rather than a developer that is purely going to be mostly for one platform, like, for example, any of the ones that Sony has, like Santa Monica for God of War, that sort of thing. So it is interesting to see that PC is at the top and mobile bringing up the second, at least in this particular survey. Again, this is only about 4,000 respondents, but that is, I'd say, a fairly significant sample size, even if it's not indicative of the entire industry. I would say we're getting a decent look into the developers, or how developers in general think regarding which platform is best to develop for. So, rather interesting, I'm sure you'll agree. So let's move on, shall we, to something regarding Intel, as they've having been a bit of a bad time on this one. So the next topic on our list is actually regarding Intel, as they have shared their full year 2018 financial results, and while they are no doubt impressive, they have fallen short of some analysts' expectations, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. So we show here, or see here should I say, that fourth quarter revenue was $18.7 billion, up 9% year over year, and full year revenue actually set an all-time record of about $70.8 billion, which again was up 13% year over year. However, while that all sounds great, and obviously it's not exactly chump change by any means, their fourth quarter revenue fell short of some analyst expectations, as I said at the start. For example, there's analysts such as Refinitiv who expected their fourth quarter revenue to be at $19.1 billion, and the earnings per share were again off target, as they were expected to be at $1.22. However, they are at $1.12. And we actually saw, interestingly, a drop in shares after these results were actually shared by Intel. And what actually didn't help was when they released their guidance for the upcoming year, of course, the outlook for Q1 2019. And apparently, according to some analysts, this was too low. They were expecting a, quote, first quarter revenue of approximately 16 billion, and apparently they were expecting it to be a guidance of 17.35. So despite the fact that those results sound rather impressive to you and I, they are again short of analyst expectations, and Intel's share price did take a rather nasty pummeling as a result. It has bounced back a little now, but it is still down in comparison to what it was previously. But, you know, share prices, they do tend to fluctuate rather wildly, to say the least. But it's not exactly great that, you know, they released their results and the shares were just like, whoop. So, yeah, obviously Intel were putting a positive spin on it. Oh, not exactly surprising, but analysts are a little skeptical, to say the least. We may see things change, of course, as we finally see the release of Intel's 10nm Ice Lake. That definitely is going to help. And if we actually see impressive performance results with that particular line of CPUs, that will also help. But at the moment, there seems to be some sort of concerned furrowing of brows going on in the analyst crowd. Anyway, let's move on, shall we, to something rather cool. Now, you remember Dark Souls, like the original Dark Souls, the original PC release, not the remaster, the original, and you remember how it was just awful, as in the PC port. The game itself, brilliant, one of my favourite games of all time, but the PC port left a lot to be desired, and that's putting it, well, rather mildly, shall we say. But, of course, one modder came to the rescue by the name of Durante with a very beloved mod by the name of DSFix, and pretty much saved the port from being borderline unplayable. Interestingly, he has now decided to co-found his own PC port studio. Now, it is going to be Durante and two of his colleagues, and they have formed a company by the name of PH3, and they are literally intending to create high-performance PC ports and also provide consulting services for development aspects such as optimization. Now, they have stressed that they're not going to be licensing games themselves. They are purely, at the moment at least, going to be focusing on getting those PC ports out there, just really making them pop, you know. They have got some serious credentials among the three of them. All three founders all hold PhDs, and Durante, whose real name is Peter, is a computer scientist. So, yeah, they've got some chops, and I really look forward to seeing what they have in store for us in terms of porting. You know, they didn't just do DSFix, he's worked on ports for Exceed games and Enhanced games and Lord knows whatever else as well. After crossing some bureaucratic I's and dotting some bureaucratic T's, PH3 is now an official company, and they are looking to be the hero we need and get some really cracking PC ports where perhaps we might have got something a touch lackluster in the past. So, thumbs up from me. DSFix, as I say, was a huge help in actually being able to play Dark Souls 1 on PC before the remaster came out, of course. So I'm curious to see their skills put to use even further. And speaking of Dark Souls, we actually have some comments from Hidetaka Miyazaki. So, I'm sure he needs no introduction, but in case you've forgotten who he is the president and CEO of From Software, and of course, we are all very much awaiting his new game, well, not his game, but their new game, should I say, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Now, before we knew what Sekiro actually was, he was very keen to point out that, look, we're done with Dark Souls. They didn't really say anything about Bloodborne specifically, but he said, look, we're done with Dark Souls after the Ring City, we're finished with it, and now he has spoken again about their plans for the future, because even when he's not speaking about Dark Souls specifically, he's also been keen to point out that they're not just going to keep repeating themselves and making the same game over and over. And from what we've seen of gameplay and trailers and so forth, Sekiro does look very different to their previous games, or at least the last few games that they've put out. Now, he recently spoke about this again in an interview with Game Informer, and of course there is going to be a link to their article in the description below this video. If you wish to go give it a read, I would highly suggest you do so. It is going to be there for your perusal. So what did he actually have to say? He said, quote, The reason there's no corpse run, as is that first of all, we don't really want to keep doing the same thing over and over again with our games. We want to try different approaches and different switching up of the systems. Speaking of death penalties, we do want to incorporate a new sense of demerit or disadvantage to death. We want the player to fear death in the same way they did before, but this will take on a different shape this time. If we were just to add in corpse running or having to go retrieve something on top of that, it would have felt too messy or too desperate or too little or too much like there's too much at stake. We want to concentrate on the new systems such as the resurrection system as well. Speaking of resurrection, this time we're taking this into elements of the story as well. So there's a reason for coming back to life, and there's more general themes and concepts around death and rebirth, so this is something we want to explore on the gameplay side as well. Now the full interview is rather lengthy, but there is something I actually just do want to mention quickly, that made me laugh more than anything else, is that he was asked if we're going to be able to get the Moonlight Greatsword in Sekiro, and the answer was no, not this time. So unfortunately, no, we're not going to get it this time around, lads. But back to Miyazaki's comments. This pretty much lines up with everything he said before, that, you know, they've obviously learned a lot while doing Dark Souls and Bloodborne, and I'm sure they very much enjoyed their time making that series. You could tell that a lot of love went into all three games, 4 if you include Bloodborne, I suppose. But I would say that's separate from Souls as much as it is very similar. Anyway, rambling a little bit. Point is, they have made it very clear that, you know, they've learned a lot, they had a great time with that series, but they don't want to keep repeating themselves and doing the same thing over and over again. They don't want to be known as that company who does the really hard games, you die and you have to keep go get your Souls or Blood Echoes or whatever they end up being called. You know, it could be Cotton Candy, it doesn't matter. And they have shown that they are definitely deviating from what they've kind of become known for the last few years with Sekiro. You know, obviously I haven't yet to play it. I've not been lucky enough to get any demos or anything like that, so I'm really looking forward to playing it for the first time when it comes out. But just what I've seen, it does look like a difficult game, but it looks very, very different from Dark Souls and very, very different from Bloodborne as well. And I'm glad, as much as I love Dark Souls, I'm glad that they've kind of been like, look, we're moving away from it, we're taking what we've learned, and we're doing something really, really cool and different. And I have to say, I really like that they're kind of integrating into the story the fact that you keep dying and coming back to life, and I'm very curious to see how that comes into the lore and how are going to actually present that lore as well, because obviously the story of Dark Souls is very much in the background, item descriptions and little touches here and there and all that sort of thing. So it's going to be interesting to see all that, how all that comes into fruition. So yeah, I'm hyped for Sekiro, guys. I don't know if that's obvious. I mean, I'm a little bit hoarse, I can hear it in my own voice, so apologies for that, but I can still feel the excitement, still feel the hype. Anyway, that's me done for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.